and welcome to this edition of Tough Talk from the Women Deliver 2016 conference in Copenhagen. I'm Andrea Sankey, and with me today I have Thembisa Fakude, a political activist who fought alongside women during South Africa's apartheid era and today contributes to Southern Africa's dialogue toward the advancement of women's rights. Thembisa, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Let's go back to the earliest days and your experience first with women's activism. How did you get involved, and where did it take you?
Well, it was automatic because I grew up with women. Three most important people in my life at the time were women: my grandmother, mother, and aunt. So I would say I was born with this gender activism awareness within me. And the South African struggle required us to be involved in the whole broader part of human struggle. And women's issues were part and parcel of that struggle. So while we were pursuing the national liberation, we also embedded within it the liberation of women. As you know, that African women are the most oppressed people on earth. You know, in South Africa they were even more oppressed because they had to deal with the issues of color and gender. So growing up in a home like that, and my parents were quite politically aware. My mum is a African nationalist, and my father was more of a socialist. We were made to be aware of our political responsibilities at a much more earlier age. So it was automatic for me that I became. I was never conscientized, lobbied by any political organization before I joined the formal structure of the struggle. I was born into a family not of conscious activists, but who were quite aware of their responsibilities towards other
Right.
humans.
Women's rights have come a long way since the days of apartheid, at least, but there are still huge problems. Speak to some of the specific issues today where progress is needed for women's rights in South Africa.
One of them is, there are a lot of traditions which are still disadvantaging women and girls. One of those is this forced marriage, which I think the government needs to do more to legislate against it. There's been tiptoeing from the government in terms of trying to address these issues because of the threat to their constituencies. So most of the politicians are careful in tackling or dealing aggressively with traditionalist and different tribal leaders who still insist on the preservation of certain cultures. So we need a much more brave, proactive government that will tackle these kind of issues. I mean, this forced marriage business, which is still taking place in the eastern part of South Africa and southeastern part of South Africa, I think has been treated with kid's glove. It's criminal, and people deserve to face justice, because at this day and age and in a country, a constitutional democracy like South Africa, you can't afford to have men going rampage, abducting girls and
Exactly.
forcing them into marriage.
And how do you make traditionalists see that change is actually good? As Graça Machel herself said, tradition is man-made, and therefore man could and should change tradition.
My view is that you deal with it issue by issue. You don't. If you're going to deal or tackle tradition as it stands, you are most likely to face backlash from the traditionalists who still yield a lot of powers within their communities.
You
But
put
if
them
you-
on the defensive, huh?
If you deal with issues, if you tackle issues which affect their children, for example, just before the interview, we had a brief discussion about the issues of sanitary pads or towels or napkins, the Americans will say. When we started the campaign, we were surprised to find traditionalists, when we told them that girls are missing school or substantial number of days of school because of menstruation, and they can't go to school because they don't have padding. We were surprised of the reaction from normal people who started donating towards the the purchasing of sanitary towels for girls in order for them to go to school. So that issue resonated with them because they were fathers. They didn't see it as a women's or girls' issue. They saw it as an issue that affected their kids. So that's why I do believe in the issue-based struggle than a broader struggle, which tend to lead them to a defensive position.
So one issue at a time, and in that respect, it's about educating men.
100%. We need to, not only in South Africa, even in Europe, men are still not educated. We still have a lot of ignorance. Most of us assume that because people are Europeans, they understand women's issues. They still don't understand women's issues. This is why we have campus rapes in some of the most developed cities in Europe. But in Africa, of course, it's worse. So we need to have this, continue to have what most people have started calling a glow local attitude. In other words, we think global and act local. So our issues should be local, but remember, they must embrace a global outlook in tackling them.
Okay, Tembisa, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you so much for joining us and sharing your insight. Remember, anyone that would like to follow these conversations, we're live on #WDLive.